Welcome to the Bladtcast. I am Christian Blatt. Very excited for this conversation about the second Joker film. And months ago, I was speaking with my friend Laura Grafton, who is now here on the show. We were talking a lot about X-Men, and the topic of this came up, and I filed a ways ago. I can't wait to talk about this movie, and here it is. It's finally here. Laura, I list you as a comic book scholar, but I don't feel like that's necessarily the best description for who you are and what you do. So take a moment, especially since this is a different show since where we talked about the X-Men, take a moment and explain to people what it is that you do.
Yeah, so I am a Master's of Arts student at the University of Waterloo in the English Rhetoric, Communication, and Design program, which is a very fancy way of saying I hang out with other graduate students and talk about the concepts of why we talk about what we talk about. My area of kind of specialization and research is the representation of intimate partner violence survivors and queer folks in comics. A great character to do that through is Harley Quinn. So I spend a very large amount of time in the DC universe dissecting Harley Quinn and her comics and what they mean and whether she represents those groups well or poorly and how much of it factors into who's writing her, how intentional the writing is or isn't, etc. And I do a lot of quantitative analysis in my approach. So I did an undergraduate thesis where I watched all of the Batman the Animated Series and counted every single word that was said and every single line and every single minute that people shared screen time to look at what that maybe said about the strengths of the relationship in the material actually presented versus the way we kind of think about these characters in culture and society.
So some of the people that hear you say that might be taken aback by the idea of watching all the episodes and counting all the words. But the reason that you and I were introduced is your colleague and as someone whose work I enjoy very much, Andrew DeMann, who has studied the Chris Claremont run on Uncanny X-Men. And his book has stats like, here's how, during these 17 years, here's how many thought balloons Wolverine has versus how many Storm has versus how, and I was just like, the idea, and I'm like, oh, I love it. I'm glad I didn't have to count it. But so I love the idea that people like you do that. And when we talk about Harley Quinn, obviously I think a lot of people know, but maybe not everybody realizes it is a character that was created for Batman the Animated Series. Yes. And then transferred over to the main comic book canon, which doesn't happen that often. In Marvel, the example I can think of is Firestar, who is a fairly minor character, but started out on Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. And, then you kind of realize, obviously, what this character is. And I think if you look at the beginning of Harley Quinn, the fact that it comes from the animated series, it's a lot more lighthearted and not really as sad and upsetting as the character could be otherwise, right? if you were to start with comic book adaptations, right?
Yeah, very true. There's a darkness to the DC universe, especially in the comics, that doesn't always come through in their cartoons or in their live action films. Their live action and their cartoons tend to be a lot more campy and approachable and somewhat cheery and almost like making fun of themselves until more recent things like Joker and others. But the comics tend to be a little bit more nitty gritty, darker film noir vibes and take themselves a little bit more seriously. So you get a variety from Quinn, depending on which version of her you're looking at, whether or not you're looking at the DC animated universe or comics canon. And it just creates this well-rounded, I think very human and relatable character, which is why she's their fourth most popular character under Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman, which you don't think of getting in something that was created in the last 30 years, not something that DC was built on.
Right, exactly. And I think we'll talk about a lot of the different sort of portrayals of her. Now, one of the things that you sent me a number of images, but this one was the first one you sent. So the concept, I guess the canon is, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I am more of a Marvel guy, but I do believe I understand. So she's the Joker's psychiatrist at one point. Is that correct? Let's start there. Okay.
So Harley starts off as kind of in her first year postdoc at Arkham Asylum, has come there because she thinks it's going to be intriguing or engaging. Batman at one point says she wanted to be one of those fun pop psychologists that writes books about crazy people, basically. Yeah. And so she comes into Arkham as a therapist to people like Poison Ivy, which is the image we see here in the origin stories that are written about her by Paul Dini and others that are considered part of the canon. She always meets Poison Ivy first. And then eventually convinces Dr. Leland to put her in touch with the Joker as the Joker's therapist. The Joker reaches out to her to initiate the relationship by leaving her a rose with his name on it, saying, "Come see me sometime." She's not really the initiant in any of these relationships with the Joker. But yeah, starts out as his doctor and then fades into his sidekick, basically gets pulled into his tragic story and wants to fix him.
And in a lot of ways, you know, you can draw a parallel, especially from the timeline where the character's created and sort of what's going on in popular fiction and media. There is this parallel to Hannibal Lecter and Clarice Starling, sort of fascinated by this person who perhaps misjudged initially, immediately dismisses and realizes that. I mean, obviously that was a huge movie at the end of the 80s. It was actually, I think, 1990, 1991. So, you know, I think the timeline sort of matches up, which even, you know, I mean, and the book was much earlier than that. The character had been around since 1981. But the sort of the point is this idea of, oh, here's a quote unquote normal person. I'm fascinated by them, and then sort of watching what happens when she gets to, you know the Joker better, I guess, for better or for worse. And so that was the first image you sent. And then again, we do have a largely audio audience. So if you want to sort of talk about what this one is here and how it kind of relates to the Harley story from the comics.
Yeah, so this is from the New 52 run. It is one of the times that Harley, after she's kind of exited the relationship with the Joker, has an opportunity to face him again and kind of has her reckoning. So she goes into Arkham Asylum to break somebody else out, a character named Mason that she does eventually start dating in this open polyamorous relationship between herself, Mason, and Poison Ivy at the time. And she goes in and gives Joker a good beating, kind of is like, you get your comeuppance, you get what you handed off to me. There's going to, you know, just getting some general revenge. And this is one of the moments where we see her kind of come into her own as a character and kind of draw her own lines on what's right and what's wrong in the world. And she does always have these moments in the new canon where she is Joker free, where her kind of trauma catches up with her, where she maybe pushes a little too far past the line, where she hurts somebody. But kind of similarly to Batman, she has this line where she might hurt somebody, but she never actually wants to kill anybody. She never wants to cross that threshold, and often is pulling herself back from the edge. And her violence is often shown as being kind of a trauma response, which is interesting representation for that group.
Yeah, looking at that image, it kind of reminded me that one of the things that I think Joaquin Phoenix does well with his Arthur Fleck character is that thing that you've seen in the comic books over decades, you know, more recent decades, where the Joker is being repeatedly pummeled in the face and he just laughs harder and harder the more you hit him. And then that makes the person that much angrier. And, you know, I think that if you had to boil down the character to that, you know, it's not all the tattoos and the grill that Jared Leto had. It's really just like, no, this is a guy that just thinks it's hysterical that you're getting angry, and he's the one who should be angry. So obviously it's a very complicated character. And look, I know in mental health, the term crazy isn't thrown away as it was. I don't know a better word that describes just the Joker. I mean, everything's wrong in his head, you know?
Yeah.
And for Harley Quinn as a psychologist, a psychiatrist, to think like, oh yeah, I could probably help this guy. That's the mistake right there, isn't it, Laura?
Yeah, it really is. And it's a mistake that a lot of folks who end up in intimate partner violence situations make. And it's taught to us through our culture. We watch movies growing up where the idea of Stockholm syndrome is normalized. Like I came up when Beauty and the Beast was the biggest film, and that's just a lovely Stockholm story that you're selling to lots of millennial youth who then go on to be like, okay, so I guess I can fix him. I guess I can turn him into a charming prince, right? And we got to be careful with our media consumption, because at the end of the day, it has power to show us what's good, but also to show us what's bad. And sometimes it normalizes the wrong thing for us.
It's funny that Beauty and the Beast kind of endures, and then there was the TV series with Linda Hamilton and Ron Perlman that I think it was like a little bit more. I mean, it wasn't realistic in any way, but it was also like, well, hold on a second, let's like actually address what this situation is. And yeah, in the Disney movie, I think a lot of Disney movies are, well, I'm just going to lock her up somewhere, and eventually she's going to come around, won't she? So
yeah.
That's the old Disney way, though. That's not really what they do now.
Yes, that's true.
So one of the images, and I think it was the one we had just looked at, or is this Gary? This is Gary Puddles, right?
Yes, this is Gary Puddles in the comics universe. He never actually gets that name, but there's a lot of scholars that believe that Gary Puddles is Hughezy Gagsworth, which is Joker's original sidekick. This is the first answer that Joker had to Robin. They are framed as being best friends, but there's a significant amount of queer coding to the story, and there's definitely an idea that they were more than best friends. In this run, which is Gotham City Sirens, he also discloses to a Joker-free Harley Quinn that there was a significant amount of abuse that went on between him and the Joker. So it frames the Joker as bisexual in this run, and it frames him as just abusive, regardless of kind of the dynamic of the relationship.
Yeah, which I think is interesting. Obviously you're able to sort of tell stories like that in the modern times. In the past, when you and I have spoken about the X-Men, those characters, there's subtext of queer and same-sex relationships. The example that's easiest to use is Mystique and Destiny, and it's written except for the way where it's actually written out. It's not express, but you're like, oh yeah, they spend all this time together, they raise a child together, and she has the Raven has the ability to shapeshift. And talking to Chris Claremont, who wrote that era, he's like, oh yeah, that's what I always figured, is that she can shapeshift. She would be able to create life inside of Destiny. And it was like, this was never approved by the Comics Code Authority. I was like 11 and 12 reading this, and like, nah, I like when Wolverine puts his claws out, And it's fascinating because obviously this character, the Joker, I mean, Batman's been around since 1941. So the Joker only shortly thereafter. And, just to have such a different definition of him at this point, and really the way that the character has become entwined with Harley Quinn, really, I think for most people, I would say it's really not until the first Suicide Squad film, because of that sequence with them together. People, I would say, obviously the animated series had a huge audience, but I think most people thought of Jack Nicholson Joker, Heath Ledger Joker. You don't think of Joker with anyone else. You just think of Joker on his own. So, is there anything else we should lay in terms of the framework before we talk about the second film? And I'm going to make the assumption that because you're Canadian, you're able to pronounce the French title of. I just assume that they make you learn French.
They make me learn French. They make us learn French in elementary school, and then you promptly forget it in high school. They only force it through to grade 9. I did do French a little bit longer than that, but I'm not sure my pronunciation would not be scoffed at by actual French speakers.
So I should have brought on somebody from Quebec and just been like, hey, can you say the name of the movie? And then we could have popped them out. We have an Irishman watching, and I don't know that helps necessarily. So so La Folie à Deux, I don't know. I mean, I know that deux is how you say two.
Folie à Deux,
yeah. So Folie à Deux. So is there anything else that we need to sort of talk about before we speak about the movie itself? I want to make sure I don't miss anything.
So the only other thing that I would bring up is that the way that Harley is represented in this film is not actually a representation of Harley Quinn. It actually follows way more closely with a character called Punchline. Punchline was introduced after Harley and the Joker split up canonically, and she becomes the Joker's new kind of sidekick, at least for a time. She very quickly separates herself and becomes an antagonist in her own right. But this storyline that we see play out and the fandom that Harley has as a result of seeing Joker go wild at the end of the last film is actually the origin story for Punchline, not the origin story for Harley Quinn. Punchline is framed as a intern at a talk show, much like the one Joker shoots up. She is the only survivor of the event. She becomes the biggest Joker fangirl. She proves her loyalty to the Joker by killing the dean of her college. She's a master's journalism student, and kills the dean to kind of prove to the Joker that she's worthy. And then proceeds to kind of run a sympathy campaign while she's being tried for these crimes that has an uprising very, very similar to the uprising we see outside the courthouse. So this story, I'm not sure I'm convinced it's a Harley Quinn Joker story. They're using Harley Quinn's name because she's popular, but it's really a Punchline Joker story with Punchline wearing Harley Quinn's clothes.
Right, and of course the interesting thing being the fact that she's not very Harley-like, and I think the dynamic, at least especially initially, seems a lot different than we're used to with Joker Harley stories.
Yes.
But so we'll talk about that. One of the things that you mentioned when we were trading messages was something that, I remembered it had happened this way, but what I didn't think about was trying to get it. And that this film starts with an animated sequence. And I will tell you, it's very difficult to find images of the animated sequence. And then I went to TikTok and there's like, thousands of them. But, using a Google search or any of the ways I usually find, I couldn't find anything. Then there's TikTok videos. So we have a few images like that. And, look, the style is, it's very interesting. Obviously, this is a Warner Brothers movie. This does not look like your Warner Brothers cartoons. But at the same time, it's the idea of starting, animated. And there's this idea that the Joker has this shadow that basically is following him everywhere. You sort of see a little bit of it in this one. And then he wants to be rid of it. And it's not explicitly tied into the movie, though. There's definitely some of in finding these videos of it, there's a lot of people that are like, well, what the hell did that have to do with the movie? Like, why did you do that? What are your thoughts, though, in sort of the decision to open in that way?
So I think the decision to open in that way is actually very powerful. I think it grounds us in the transmedia nature of these characters, the fact that they are in cartoons, the fact that they are in comics, the fact that they are in live action. It also frames it as a film that's kind of taking place outside of the real, which is an interesting way to start a live action film. We're kind of seeing a version of a summary of the last film from the Joker's perspective in this cartoon, and kind of the story that his lawyers are trying to sell, that it wasn't really him who did it. It was this shadow self. It was this alternate personality that took over. I do actually think it carries into the film more than you think, though, because it's framed as the shadow self. And then if you look at the lighting in the film throughout, we get all these framings where there's kind of like by-lighting adjacent stuff where there's a light side and a dark side to everything. And so we get this through the lighting in the film kind of idea that shadow self is carrying through the rest of it. And that the Joker is constantly struggling with this concept of identity. And as we get towards the end of the film and he kind of picks a lane and is like, no, it was me, I was in control, we see that bylighting kind of fade and fall to the side rather than be continued. So this kind of Freudian concept, I believe, I think shadow self comes from Freud, and the idea that his id is taking over the ego is kind of an interesting grain that cartoon at the start really helps to frame. It also causes us to call our attention to every time that Pepe Le Pew is on this TV in the background, which happens a lot. And it happens when Joker is kind of like falling for Harley or deciding he's in love. And it's kind of a reminder, subtextually, that this isn't a healthy relationship, that maybe he is chasing her more than what we're actually actually seeing on screen, because we have to remember that this has a perspective. Folie deux means like the madness of two people. It's like a fantasy world that two people create. And so that kind of the juxtaposition between his like, oh, she loves me, there's something worth living for, and the Pepe Le Pew cartoons in the background that are very aggressively harassment based. If you're watching for that stuff, call your attention to the fact that like this isn't reality, this isn't love, this is a chase sequence. And the question is, whose narrative of this chase sequence is true? Is Harley pursuing him true? Is he telling us the full story? How honest is our narrator in the perspective we're seeing?
Right, and obviously the parallel for Pepe Le Pew, one of the earliest problematic animated characters,
Yes.
is that cat is very clearly not interested, and also very clearly not a cat. I mean, not a skunk.
Yes.
But he's not hearing it, and in my mind, there's hundreds of cartoons where that happens, but there's probably only the one. I just saw it so many times, that it would play those again and again. And, if you take Pepe Le Pew out of that context and he's just walking around a skunk who talks like that, it's very funny. But yeah, and I that was definitely less than subtle filmmaking that Pepe Le Pew showed up so often. Let's talk about, they often refer to her as Lee in this movie, as in, I don't know if that's early to throw us off, to make us think that maybe it's not Harley Quinn. But when we first meet her, she is in like a singing group there at Arkham, basically, where he's locked up. And they strike up a conversation, and as it goes along, we start to find out that she's a fan of his, and she ends up putting herself in there. And I feel like the dynamic quickly becomes apparent how different it is than the way that say the Margot Robbie, Jared Leto Joker was. This is very much she's like pulling all the strings, especially, I guess, spoiler alert, when she engineers being able to tell him I'm pregnant, so this Harley seems completely in control, I would say, the whole time. But I'm wondering if you saw anything different than that, Laura.
Yeah, no, I do agree. She seems in control. I'm not a huge fan of what they did to Harley here, but they do distance her quite a bit from the canon. And like the first way they do that is using Lee rather than Harles, which is typically how folks shorten her name in canon. And this does play into the fact that I do think this is more of a Punchline story wearing Harley Quinn clothes rather than an actually Harley Quinn story, because Punchline chases the Joker like this. Punchline lies to the Joker. Punchline manipulates the version of herself to fit into his fantasy. So if we're looking from a comics canon standpoint, then this isn't really Harley to me. This is Punchline dressed up as Harley.
Right. Yeah. So I think that that differentiation, and talking about it in terms of a filmmaking standpoint, because obviously, ultimately, that's why we go and see these things, is it became apparent through the trailers, and it's just sort of the rumblings that you started to hear early, that the musical sequences were going to mostly be fantasy. And only one of the sequences played out in the way I imagine, which is the one where they're on the big, like, sort of variety show set and they're dressed up in these fancy costumes. I kind of thought it was all going to be like that. And to me, it seems like, just from, again, watching this on a huge IMAX screen, it seems like a missed opportunity to have them dressed as they were in prison garb. And, I think that obviously Lady Gaga can be very glamorous when she wants to, but as we saw in A Star is Born, that she could also go the other way. She can be very effective that way. So I already had the problem of like, okay, so they have this great singer and she's in this movie because it's a musical. And, I have no problem with her acting, but I was just like, oh, they really didn't use her as much as I thought in terms of having her sing big production, numbers like showstoppers. What did you think about sort of what we actually get in terms of the musical numbers in this?
Yeah, so I thought the musical selection was really intriguing. Like one of the main songs throughout, I'm Gonna Build a Mountain,
Yeah.
is from a musical called Stop the World, I Want to Get Off, which is a musical about a circus mime named Little Chap. And it basically ends in a death scene where he dies semi-violently and then kind of like mimes his rebirth, which is kind of an interesting mirror to the way this ends. um but I agree that like I would have, if we're going to make it a musical, wanted the numbers to be a little bigger, wanted a clearer cut between kind of the music as fantasy and the real world. I think grounding it more in the nitty gritty of the real world is an interesting metaphor for what mental health really looks like, for the idea that for folks that are suffering from conditions like this, they're not always aware of when they're breaking off from reality. And I think the scenes where we get the bigger productions, where we get those talk show moments, are when Joker is maybe a little bit more self-aware that he is breaking down, that isn't the reality, that something, there's a stressor, there's a trigger, and he is kind of making up stories. But when we're more grounded in the real world, it's this question of like, is this the truth? Like, is the music the only thing indicating it's not? How close are we to the perception of reality? How far off reality are those scenes, even where they suggest that they are not based in the real, but there isn't really any proof or tracking of that, which also plays into the lack of reliability of the narrator. Like most of the scenes where they are kind of partnering up and where Harley does have a certain level of sanity or authority or control over the situation quickly go into these musical sequences. And it's like, how much of that sense of control is just our Joker's perspective on who Harley Quinn is in that moment? How much control does she really have versus how much manipulation is he forcing on her?
Yeah, a couple comments. My friend Raging Rhino, John in Texas, talking about how this. He agrees this isn't really Harley. Then again, it's not really Joker. And yeah, towards the end of our part of the conversation, we'll talk about the way that the film ends. But yeah, this that is, I think, the idea. And even when they sort of touched on Joker in the Gotham TV series, it's usually this idea that Joker is literally an idea. It's a concept, and
Mhm.
eventually there's a guy, but before there's a guy, it's an idea, and that sort of builds it up. And just also in the chat, uh, his text is so large you can't see Laura and I. Uh, the Sky the Magnanimous 8, the Bladtcast. I love the idea of the first Joker. Treat mental illness as a disease and don't step on the little guys when they're down, but don't take lives either. Joker 2 is an off balance story. IDK, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I think that there's definitely, I think tonally they are similar, but this movie does have sort of a different feel. And fundamentally, it's unnecessary to have made this follow up movie, I think.
It really is.
And when I heard it was going to be a musical, that was definitely, I'd already said, oh, another Joker movie. And then you get another, it's sort of a double uh-oh. And, I think that sort of exploring who Arthur is, and, I think there's something to be said for that. But when we get to the courtroom scenes, and they even have to address, the judge says like, yeah, I don't want him to be dressed up like a clown. And I'm like, well, yeah, because I know this is a comic book reality. No judge is going to let you sit there dressed like a clown. You know,
Yeah.
it's just like, what, Judge Judy is going to let you do that? No, I don't think so. So, I mean, the idea that of him representing himself. I mean, I don't know how tightly wound this story was, but it really unravels quickly, and there's this destruction to the side of the courthouse and the rioting and all that. It was somewhat tethered to telling a story that I thought maybe it was going somewhere. I don't think I was ever rewarded for my time visually. And I know that's one of the things you want to talk about, Laura, is that it is actually it's beautiful in a lot of ways. There's movies that I don't like, but that you have to admit, like, yeah, but it looks good. Earlier this week I did a podcast about Francis Ford Coppola's new film Megalopolis,
Mhm.
Look, it looks great. What's happening on the screen is not, but it's just the composition of shot and depth of field. And one of the images you sent me is sort of this idea where they're kissing and the fire's behind them and the light shining. There's beautiful shots throughout the movie like this, right, Laura?
Yeah, there's absolutely gorgeous shots. And this is also one of those ones where we get into that split lighting where we have kind of the shadow self and the not shadow self reflected in the way that they're deciding to divide the screen, which I find really intriguing, especially in these moments, because we see Harley on the darker side of the screen as like the corrupt influence, Joker where it's maybe a little bit lighter, getting pulled into her and into her darkness, which is interesting visual metaphor.
Yeah, and I think that sort of their story is very unsatisfying and unfulfilling. They're sort of like they have that encounter on the steps, the famous steps from the first movie, and she's already kind of moved on from him, and she's not interested. And I was like, all right, I don't know if I feel like that reaction tracks with where the character was, but obviously he does renounce the idea of the Joker. By the way, I don't know that I believe him when he says that, because again, he is crazy, Arthur
Yeah.
Fleck. He's very mentally unstable, I guess is the better way to put that in 2024. But still, this guy is completely off balance, and that might have been the moment where he's like, this isn't working. Yeah, so the Joker's not real, that. And what did you think sort of about as the Harley character's arc kind of as we follow it through to the end, Laura?
Yeah, I'm not sure it tracked fully for me either. I would have expected there to be maybe a slower fade. Like, how do you go from being in love with him enough to have rented out his previous apartment and be putting a house together in the old neighborhood, from that to like, no, I don't actually love you just because you admit a truth about yourself. It really felt also like Joker was kind of testing to see where she was at and who or what concept of him she was in love with at that point too. Because that's after he had discovered that she's been lying to him effectively their whole relationship. And I think he's checking to see how real it is, how real the feelings are. And he gets an answer. He gets an answer really quickly. She walks out of the courtroom when he decides that there's not this split personality, that he's given up on the fantasy, as she says, right?
Right.
But I don't know. Again, it comes back to like how much of all the representations of how into him she is are just in the Joker's head in this little fantasy land. And when you give up on the fantasy, maybe it does fall apart like that. Maybe that's what she's been like the whole time. We do, like when she breaks into his cell to kind of like encourage him and what have you after she checks herself out, and they're having sex, her face falls. She is not into that experience at all during that scene. So maybe that's actually the reality of what's been going on, where he's been more into her than she's into him and is projecting his love onto her the entire time. And we only see that when he decides to drop the fantasy.
Yeah, and it's interesting because even the fantasies, even the one that I felt like production-wise looked and sounded the best, the one that we can see right here where they're on like the variety show set, even in that one, in his fantasy, she doesn't really love him. She pulls a gun on him. So
Yeah.
it's like on some level, he always kind of knows that, oh yeah, this thing isn't for real. And, I think, look, a lot of us go through life probably feeling that in relationships, even friendships. You're like, is this person into this as much as I am? And even Arthur understands it, and it's interesting, because he builds up this rapport with the inmates and even the guards, and tell us a joke, Arthur. And, in the early part of the movie, he's clearly not in the place where he's enjoying doing that. And one of the things that I know the second part of our conversation, when my friend Hughezy is going to pop on, the reaction to the guards to what Arthur says in the courtroom. it's not explicitly shown, but they drag him into the bathroom, and every assumption is that, we've heard terrible stories of police brutality. This definitely sort of echoes the news coverage of stories like that, which I remember a number of them growing up in New York. And that you feel that, he's violated, and, in the story I'm thinking of, they use like a broom handle, so it's probably exactly what happens to him.
Yeah.
And the one thing I will say is, if that is indeed what happens, Todd Phillips, thank you for not showing it to us or even hinting at it. I feel like that's someplace we've gotten in filmmaking at this point, where we don't necessarily need to see those sequences. There's times where, a movie like The Accused is built on the encounter, so sometimes sometimes you feel like you need to see it. Sometimes you feel like you don't, by the way. But yeah.
Well, what's really interesting about that is that the police brutality that takes place directly on the screen versus what takes place off screen is very selective and extremely racist. So we see Joker get beat up by the police in the cartoon that happens at the beginning, not in live action. The first scene that we cut to in the prison has the guards beating up on a black man. Every time they have moments of riot in the prison, we see guards beat up the black men. We do not see them do it to the white men. When it happens to the white men, it happens off screen. It happens off screen to the Joker. It happens off screen to the Joker's little buddy that he ends up kissing in the yard and becomes his tag along when he is defending Joker, and the guards strangle him to death off screen. But we are getting police brutality. We're just getting the police brutality that is acceptable to a white audience. And that is potentially problematic.
Well, I will admit that I didn't even think about that. I didn't notice it. I noticed police brutality. I didn't realize the selective way that they showed it. I will still appreciate that they didn't show us what happened to Arthur.
But very much so. I don't need to see that any day of the week, but it is just worth pointing out that there is a threshold for police brutality there that's targeted at a specific audience and potentially problematic.
Yeah. So what do you think sort of that idea that that's a part of the story, even if it's not part of the story, and that sort of will directly tie into the way the film ends. But so before we get to that part, we're going to just make sure that if you really want to see this movie, there's a lot of it that wouldn't be spoiled by listening to us. The ending is definitely something that we would spoil in talking about it. So I'm just letting everyone know that it's something that and I think people, there are some reviews that kind of aren't subtle enough about the way that the movie ends, but talk about sort of the way that Arthur's treated in the latter part of the film by the police, but then also, or not police, but I guess they're prison guards, but also what the prison guards look the other way for happening,
Yeah. And so I think it's something we hear about in media all the time, is kind of the mistreatment of prisoners in general, right? And the prison guards, generally speaking, are willing to look the other way in terms of violence against other inmates that's participated by the other inmates. They are willing to turn the other cheek when it's kind of like minor stuff, or when people are hurting themselves or any of those things. But the second they get personally attacked, the second Joker calls out the guards for being idiots or whatever speech he goes on in the courtroom, then it's personal. Then they get aggravated. Things go up a notch. They do whatever they do to Arthur in the bathroom, which is clearly seen as not okay. We see Arthur kind of dissociate from that experience and go into a dreamlike state where, after he's put back in his cell, after he closes his eyes and is like, no, I washed my own makeup off. I took this off. This was my decision, trying to reclaim some agency there. We see the guards not be okay with other prisoners coming to Arthur's defense when they're trying to figure out what's happening, when they're trying to protest these conditions, which is another thing we see happen a lot in prisons. My child is walking back and forth. He is home from school today due to the long weekend. I just see him in the background there. We just see this lack of tolerance for basically any kind of advocacy on behalf of the prisoners for their rights to bodily autonomy, their rights to not be abused, etc. I think it's important to do that. Okay, buddy, go back to your room now. I think it's important.
To see you, though.
Oh, it's great. I think it's important to have that be present in anything that addresses kind of our court systems and our police systems these days. We know there are problems. And again, as I was saying earlier, our media can be a powerful tool in helping to normalize those problems and move towards solving them. And if we ignore the fact that those problems exist in films like this, then we perpetuate them. Whereas addressing them is a first step, at least, in helping to normalize that this isn't okay, to make the audience just as uncomfortable enough to maybe want to do something about it the next time it comes up in an election ballot or any of those things.
Yeah, I think that obviously you sort of helped me think about what is pictured on screen in a very different way, because I didn't realize that it was only the black prisoners until it's Arthur, and this idea that you're only going to go as far as the guards want to let you. It doesn't really matter what happens on the outside. They really are in charge there, and they like him for most of the movie. And I think that that is it's almost like Arthur's crazy. That he doesn't he badmouths the only people who treat him well. So all of that just sort of builds up to, he's found guilty, but then there is sort of the maybe a little harder to believe than Todd Phillips intended, the way the breakout goes, and then he ends up apprehended again, which is not where I saw it going. I figured he was going to go off and then the movie was going to end and Joker's still an idea, but then he goes back to jail. And again, it says on the screen, spoilers for Joker 2. And, this guy who's, chipping at him, he has a joke, and then he stabs him violently, and we watch Arthur bleed out, and that's the end of the movie. And I think that in films where, the main character dies at the end, usually you feel like there's a reason for it. In this film, it feels like this is the end. This is how we show it's the end. And maybe it's also, no, Warner Brothers, I will not make a third Joker. I'll show you. Which he didn't have to worry about if he could have, looked into the future and seen the box office opening weekend. What are your thoughts on that decision? Because it's one of the most baffling parts of the story. And there's a lot of things that are, mind numbing and confusing about this movie.
It felt very Shakespearean. It felt like I'm going to kill off every character that matters in this. We're going to have like Harley Quinn stop being crazy, stop engaging with this universe and kind of like fade away into the distance. And we're going to kill Joker. But it's also interesting because if Joker is an idea, you can't really kill an idea. And to some degree, that idea might get stronger with a martyr. We don't see him get martyred necessarily. We don't know how his death is communicated out into the universe. But this could also be an action that goes and has those people that are already so strongly fanboys of the Joker come up and fill the gap that he's leaving through that martyrdom. There's also, preceding this scene, he runs into somebody who has like cosplayed him so hard that they look exactly like him before the bomb goes off and he loses some of his face paint in that explosion. This man comes and tries to rescue him along with another friend wearing a Joker mask that is much less true to figure cosplay. But I could see a world in which those two decide that they're going to fill the gap, that they're going to be the new Joker after figuring out that he's been killed by somebody, that the guards let this happen. It can become an activator sequence for future storylines, probably not storylines that Phillips is going to do because he seems to be very over this. But it can be a launching off point for Joker into an idea rather than a person. And in the canon, Joker is always an idea, not a person. We don't get a name associated with Joker in canon, so having him be a person outside of the Joker is just odd. We just have this concept of anarchy and craziness that exists in the Batman universe via Joker.
It's interesting because, even if, say, the next Matt Reeves Batman with Robert Pattinson doesn't have Joker in it, you're sure that he will be in there at some point. I'm sure Warner Brothers will insist on it. So we'll get yet another iteration of the Joker that has literally no ties to this one,
Yeah.
probably not even inspired by it. It will be interesting to see what they do. And there is this narrative online that Todd Phillips did this and Warner Brothers wanted him to do this to sort of punish people for liking the first one. I don't know how much of that you've seen, but it's almost more like they're trying to say, like, no, we're going to destroy the movie that you liked because we don't like the reasons you enjoyed it. Go ahead.
So I can see that, and it's like I went into this movie expecting to hate it because I did not like the first one. I did not like the portion of the fandom that it brought out or the reasons people liked the original Joker for the most part. But I really enjoyed it. It felt like kind of like a weird visual apology to the queer community. Like regardless, like the songs that they were picking were all these weird fandom hits. Even the Build a Mountain song that they picked has been used recently in like AIDS fundraising by Broadway and stuff like that, which is just intriguing, right? But I'm also like sitting there and I'm like, I don't really like what Todd Phillips does with any of his films. They tend to be targeted at somebody that is very much not me, and I'm not sure that you did this actually on purpose. Like, I'm not sure you're capable of growing that much and doing this actually on purpose. It almost seems like he did it well by accident. But it does, like, it very much does call out that group. And the strange thing is that when I was watching this, I was in a mostly empty theater, but there was a dude bro behind me that was very clearly a fan of the first one and was like one of those people that watches a movie and can't keep his inside thoughts to himself. And so when he wasn't commenting on the fact that I was like making notes in my journal about everything and why is she still writing and what have you, it was like all very much like, is he trying to convince me that I need to get help because I like the first one? The Joker's not meant to be crazy. The Joker doesn't need a therapist. Like, it's just supposed to be normalizing the fact that it's okay to be alone. And I'm like, well, maybe some of this is getting through to you. Maybe you should
I'm sorry, this guy's saying all of this in the theater during the movie.
Oh, yeah.
What you're trying to tell us in the US is that the myth that Canadians are polite is actually not true.
Oh, it's really not true. We just I wouldn't call us polite. I would call us conflict avoidant.
Yeah, right. I get it. Yeah. It's like in the southern US, somebody will say, "Oh, bless your heart," where it actually means "I hope you die."
Yeah, pretty much.
My gosh! So the idea that he's having this dialogue and I don't know, commenting on somebody taking notes. I went to on a Thursday night. I saw it in IMAX. It was opening night, and it was packed, and no one was really having those sort of comments. But it was a lot of like people not sure how to process it after the fact. We sort of skipped over it when I was sharing your images. It is actually it was a great visual. When it was raining out in the yard, the prison yard, and we get this overhead shot of these umbrellas. And Arthur, by the way, not covered by an umbrella, but the guards are. And it's a perfect example of like, again, because I saw them in the span of a few days, you can talk about aspects of filmmaking that are really well done in a movie like this, in a movie like Megalopolis. You have the resources, you have the budget, you have the crews, you have everything. So there's moments like this, you're like, oh, that actually looks really great, but it's not really the takeaway from the movie. It's like, oh, the cinematography was solid, right?
Right. Yeah. And it's also like this kind of subtle queer coding because it's like, why are prison guards having rainbow umbrellas? Like you would think the prison issued umbrella would be black, right? But then we have this like kind of muted rainbow aspect to it around a character that kisses a man in the prison yard and is also all these things, right? And is canonically queer and everything. So it's just interesting to see some of that, especially when, like, after watching the second film, I rewatched the first film and I'm like, how much do I hate the first film again? And none of this is like, he's not really as heavily queer coded in the first film. And when he is, it's in like a very shamed way. It's in very like a closeted homophobia, like way, whereas with this it's almost a question of identity, and the closer he gets to kind of being okay with his identity, both in terms of his potential queerness but also in terms of taking ownership over the actions of the Joker and his shadow self, the more into reality and away from this fantasy mental breakdown space we see him get, which is an interesting journey to send somebody on.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that is definitely the attempt, is to send us on an interesting journey, and obviously there's a lot to say about this film, and there's a lot more that I'm going to say with my friend Hughezy in a moment. Laura, are there any sort of final thoughts? I feel like we've sort of encompassed the character in the movie into under an hour, which I'm impressed by. But is there anything else that you feel like any threads that we didn't pull on yet?
No, I think we covered it. I think that as long as you're going into this film with an understanding that it is not going to be what the first one is, that it's actually kind of a good movie. Maybe I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I was going to, and I'm like hesitant to recommend it, but there are layers to it, and it's very intriguing to kind of watch and dissect, and to watch more critically in an art house way, not in like a good time DC way. If you're looking for good time DC, then this isn't the film for you.
Well,
but if you want to like dig through it, then it's a good time.
that's relevant to my friend Kame Egan in the chat. I want to see Joker 2, but because I've heard it's a hot mess, I'm not in a hurry to see it. And the spoilers are fine by me. That's good because we hit the biggest one. I would say, because of the visuals that Laura and I are talking about, if you can see it in the theater, I would. But as my next guest will tell you, the importance of having a large home cinema, it really takes away the idea that somebody was talking that much in the seat behind you, Laura. It's what everybody says why they don't like to go to the movies. Ken Megan says, "Is it better than Megalopolis? It's shorter." And in some ways, the story, you know what? Yes, it is better, but neither one is a movie I'd recommend for people to enjoy. It's more like, do you love film? You should study these, especially if you are an aspiring filmmaker. Laura, I appreciate you giving me some of your time. It's always great to talk to people who don't just think about these things. They take the time to, like you said, count out all the words in episodes of Batman the Animated Series and then analyze them so that we don't have to. I love reading them. I love finding out that stuff, but I think I don't have the patience to count it. Where would people find you and your work, Laura?
So my thesis research and things related to that are on Instagram at Quantifying Quinn. So you can find me there. Everything else, I am at LL Grafton on all the other platforms.
Well, I appreciate that, and I look forward to whatever our next conversation will be. Hopefully, we get some more X-Men at some point in the near future, because that's what I'm always looking for. Thanks again, Laura Grafton, and it was great to have your kids say hello in the background, because your Thanksgiving's coming up, right? That's what this long weekend is. Yeah,
that is what this long weekend is. We're heading out to Grandma and Grandpa's place as soon as I wrap up here.
Oh my gosh! All right, well, over the river and through the woods to grandmother's house you go. Thank you so much, and happy Canadian Thanksgiving, or as you call it there, Thanksgiving.
Thanks so much. Have a good one. Bye.
All right, thank you. Now, someone who doesn't celebrate Thanksgiving of any kind is my friend Adam Hughezy, the H-Man Hughes, who was watching patiently as we were talking about the Joker film. And I'm glad that you wanted to be a part of this conversation today, Hughezy. And my first question, is there an immediate thought you have walking out of Joker La Folie deux? As soon as it's over, what are your thoughts, your immediate reactions?
Well, we actually do have Thanksgiving now, and that thanks will be given every time I don't see a Todd Phillips film from now on. Laura seems incredibly intelligent, but I think she's given way, way too much credit to the guy who directed The Hangover Part 3.
Don't forget Hangover Part 2, Hughezy.
Oh, that was the really good one.
Yeah.
I know. But I just thought that basically I thought it was just a really bad film that was done to get paid a lot of money. As I don't think there'll be a Hangover 4, so Todd Phillips was probably thinking this film made well over $1 billion. It only cost like $50 million to make.
Yeah,
there was a lot of big royalty checks come in, so he's thinking, okay, sequel, because I remembered all that talk that he was going to do a Lex Luthor film,
Yeah.
and thank Christ that didn't happen. But yeah, thanks Kamala.
Right, exactly. Look, we know how that happened. There were some comments earlier that I actually meant to bring up on the screen while Laura was here. Raging Rhino, Harley had Bonnie and Clyde syndrome when she finds out he's not the bad guy. She always thought he was. She's done. One of the many things that annoyed him about Joker 2. And Sky the Magnanimous had this thought: if Todd Phillips adapted the comic Mad Love as a film adaptation for Joker 2, with a twist, no musical elements, which Hughes and I will get to in a moment, it would have been a more cohesive and compelling story. Not sure. I would say I am sure. If you don't try to approach this as a musical, that's better. Because reportedly, and I believe you've heard this, Hughezy, that one day Joaquin Phoenix woke up and he'd had a dream and he said Joker 2 should be a musical. Have you heard that?
Yeah, it doesn't shock me at all. I mean, you hear the stories that when he was making the Napoleon film with Ridley Scott, that he was a total nightmare on set and that he was constantly coming up with ideas for changes and rewrites. There's that
Which,
film,
by the way, in a film based on a historical figure that's very well documented, you should always be looking to make script changes, right, Hughezy?
Oh yeah, but I did think it was weird when that bit when Reese Witherspoon came up to Napoleon and said, "You can't walk no line." And I would actually love to see an extended version of that scene from Walk the Line when she says, "No, you can't walk the line," and if somebody else goes, what's she talking about? What does that mean?
Yeah, right.
I can't walk in the line. What is she talking about?
Was she saying the name of the movie? Oh, okay. Now
Yeah.
we get it. I saw that Napoleon movie, by the way, and it was in the part before we got Oscar nominations, and I think that somehow I was tricked into thinking it was going to get nominated. He's the only one with an American accent in the whole film, and then what I will say about that is credit to him for not trying to do a British or let alone French accent. You know, usually there's mostly English actors in movies like this. Like there was an HBO series called Rome. Everyone's British in it. And I was just like, we're supposed to be okay with this. There's a lot of problems with the Napoleon movie, but that's not really what we're here to talk about today. You know?
Yeah, like with the Joker 2, it had that Brendan Gleeson playing the security guard in his full accent, and it's like, okay, immigrant.
Yeah, right.
Thanks, Kamala.
Right, exactly. Raging Rhino wants the anti-director's cut. Yeah, give me the studio cut. Show me Joker 2 without all the singing. I may almost like it. I think that no. I mean, I think that the story is bad on its own. The singing makes it worse. And Hughes, you don't strike me as someone who has much affinity for musical theater, but maybe I've misjudged you. Maybe there's a musical or two. You know, if they ever did a Fast and Furious musical, you'd fly to Broadway to see it, or you know, the West End in London. But I feel like musical films and theater are not in your proverbial wheelhouse.
No, I think that musicals generally are too surreal, and I'm saying this as someone that loves science fiction, but the fact that someone would just randomly break out into song and people are okay with it makes no sense to me. And I think specifically with the Joker 2, are we really supposed to be shocked that Lady Gaga's character can sing?
Yeah, I know.
It's like there's this really good film recently made called Cabaret, starring Cher and Christina Applegate or whatever the fucking name was, and where they both play singers, and wouldn't you know it, Christina Applegate's character could sing, and you're like, what are the chances? It's, I don't like it when they cast singers to play singers. I didn't like her in A Star Is Born. Should have been called A Face Can't Frown. But seriously, Christian.
But seriously.
Because she actually can act.
Yeah.
She was in, speaking of Ridley Scott, she was in The House of Gucci. And,
yeah. That's right.
She was really good in that. because she was actually acting. But I just thought that this whole thing came across as a big, strange marketing ploy. Like, she got a big salary, and then she now has an album out as a soundtrack. Jacques Queen and Todd Phillips get giant upfront salaries. It's very, very strange. Like something, it's kind of like, have you ever heard the theory going around that certain Adam Sandler films were giant budget tax write-offs?
I've never heard that specifically, but I think that what we've seen, the way that we have some high profile movies, actually Warner Brothers, there was it was a Batgirl movie, I think, that they were supposed to put out, and it was filmed, and it had Michael Keaton in it as an older Batman, and the movie never came out. And there's a Coyote movie, the Coyote from Bugs Bunny, that the Looney Tunes Coyote movie, and I think he sues someone, or I don't know. I forget exactly what the title is, but something like that. It's Acme versus Wile E. Coyote or something. And so I understand that, the not releasing movies as tax write-downs. My wife wrote for a series for Disney Plus that is no longer on Disney Plus because they, not having it on, I guess, makes it more of a write-off for the loss. It was 2 seasons of a show she worked on called The Mysterious Benedict Society that was based on a series of books, successful series of books. And you get a lot of decisions like that. And, your explanation would explain a number of Adam Sandler movies. I mean, just Jack and Jill alone. We don't have to talk about any other ones, really. We're just talking about Jack and Jill.
But for me, in watching Joker 2, because I would agree with Laura in that I didn't like Joker 1 at all. I thought that, exactly as she said, that a lot of the reaction it got from people that loved it was the exact type of like, oh, here we go, this type of stupid, yeah, I'm hellback too, and all this shit, and sometimes I feel like exploding as well. It's like, do you? Is that and you didn't think that before you seen the Joker? It was only afterwards. But I think one of the things that really harmed Joker 2 is that Joker 1 was sort of infamous for the fact that it was like a very obvious mashup of Taxi Driver with the King of Comedy.
Yeah. And putting Robert De Niro in the talk show host role, it's almost like acknowledging that. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and so I think that going into this one, Todd Phillips was like, oh shit, we're going to have to do something that's actually original this time. And and then instead, the musical route could have been good if it was in a way, if stuff was actually happening during the songs, but all they were like an extra 35 minutes of footage that added nothing at all to the story. And in fact, because I have a weak bladder, I went for 2 pisses, and only one of them actually made it to the bathroom on time. But let's not talk about that.
Well, then talk about that part.
Yeah, and I asked the people that I was with, this is what happened, and they said nothing. They did a song, and it's like, oh, then why was it in the thing?
Wow, I think
but
there's
also,
a lot of things you can ask. Why was that in there? What were you going to say?
Yeah, but I also have a problem with a series of films or a sequel when, in hindsight, you can just look at it and say, okay, Joker 1 and 2 should have been one film. Joker 2 felt like a really long, what's the term? Epilogue?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like if any of my any listeners out there have ever played the great Red Dead Redemption 2, once you finish the game, there's an epilogue that's about 3 hours long.
Oh no.
Yeah, and it really is just like, oh Christ. And it felt to me that Joker 2 was a very long epilogue that could have been added to the end of Joker 1, and that you could have told this like 3 hour long story of this guy, Arthur Dent, or whatever his name was.
Arthur Fleck, yeah.
Who's Arthur Dent?
Well, there's Harvey Dent, who is featured in this movie. Harvey Dent, but Arthur Fleck is the character at the center of this. But we do see Harvey Dent, who goes on to become Two-Face in Batman canon, as seen in Obviously, Tommy Lee Jones is the one who really nailed the Two-Face performance. Yeah.
Arthur Dent, I'm just remembering, is who Martin Freeman played in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's which was a book first. Kids, go to the library, check it out.
Yeah, you pieces of shit.
A couple things here. Raging Rhino says, my love of musicals begins and ends with Rocky Horror Picture Show. I think you're trying to tell us something about your personal life by it being that one. I would tell everyone to see Book of Mormon, which was written by Trey Parker and Matt Stone of South Park. It's the musical for people who hate musicals. To see like something like Spamalot, boy, you got to really love Monty Python to want to see that. The great Sam Bibley. They should have just made this one a remix of My Cousin Vinny. That would have rocked. That would have been great if it was My Cousin Vinny. But Marissa Tomei was Harley, and she's trying to help Joker get out of this. And Ivan Soto says this movie didn't really have anything to say. Crazy. Well, it didn't have anything to say, and it is crazy, and it's about crazy people. All of that being true.
Yeah, but there were so many little things about it that I thought, oh, this could go in a really interesting direction. This could get really good. Where when it shows you that Arthur Fleck has acolytes, which is a good idea for a name for a really good TV show. What if the film was about the outside of the Joker trial, and what if it's about these lunatics who are riling themselves up into a frenzy because they're like, yeah, Arthur Dent's our hero, he's gonna save us. Little do they know, he's a very mentally confused guy with the hair lip, and he's just in there thinking like, I can't do any of it. I don't want to be the Joker. I'm not the Joker. Or if they'd have actually followed the guy from the ending, I think that it should have been more about whoever Lady Gaga played and other people. It just so happens that Arthur, the Joker's in this story.
Well, when it comes to sort of the musical aspect of it, we should talk about the fact that Joaquin Phoenix's singing is never good at any time in the entire film. I don't know if it's always his voice. I don't know if it's auto-tuned. There's a fundamental problem with having this be a musical is the fact that your main character can't sing. Now, I'm not talking Russell Crowe can't sing, all right? That's not what I'm here to say, Hughezy. I'm not here to besmirch the great Russell Crowe.
Clearly, someone hasn't seen Rock of Ages. I will never, ever forgive Alec Baldwin for what he did to REO Speedwagon. Everything else I will forgive him for.
Well, yeah, I mean, I couldn't even make a list of anything else that you should not forgive him for. But REO Speedwagon did make REO Speedwagon. So it's sort of a top-down problem. And Ivan Soto is saying, as I heard, they didn't want the songs to be sung well. Yeah, I think that was clearly. It's not entertaining to watch people sing badly. I mean, that's what Hughezy says to everyone walking into a Green Day concert. He's telling them, "Don't go in. You don't want to see people sing badly." But by the way, I am seeing Weezer tonight. They'll be doing their entire first album in its entirety, so I'm very excited for that. Thus, the shirt.
But I love Weezer, and
well,
to show how woke I am. On Monday, I went to go see Lauryn Hill and the one Fuji because the other Fuji has sued her. So no, there was supposed to be a big Fuji's tour that it's not a Fuji's tour. But I'm sure your money was better spent than if you went to see Rage Against the Machine, but that's a conversation for another time. Kemi Egan makes the point. Joaquin was terrific as Johnny Cash. Look, you're not saying something that's false there. But Raging Rhino does say, I've heard better singing at a local dive bar karaoke night. And if he has sung well in the past, first of all, that'll make you question who's actually doing the vocals in that. In the Oliver Stone's Doors movie, it's actually Val Kilmer singing. It's talk about the movie itself, but he did all the singing for that movie. Yeah. But the thing I think it would say about because there's a TV show that was out earlier this year that I was fascinated by. It was so bad, called The Idol, and it was really just in every way shit. But that being said, what's her name? Lily Rose Depp was in it, and and even though it was terrible, she gave a really good performance. And Joaquin Phoenix was still giving a great performance in this as the Joker. It just so happens that it was so bad.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, like, it's very jarring when you see him in the beginning. Joaquin Phoenix is not a heavy gentleman, but just the fact that he's got so skinny for these scenes where you're seeing like his bones protruding, like his shoulder blades are sticking out, and you're like, oh, this is really disturbing to look at. And then he starts acting, and then it that gets called into question, I guess, a few times. But it's I don't know. I thought that I was fine with the first movie. I thought it had a vision. I didn't walk out of it and go like, oh, this is amazing. No, I haven't re-listened to the episode I did after I saw it. Maybe I liked it a lot in the moment, but I thought that the Murray Franklin talk show segment was that's what every late night talk show should be like. I don't know, I'd watch every night. If there was ever the chance that Jimmy Fallon might do that to one of his guests. I would absolutely watch. It's like, you thought we were here for a pie eating contest. Surprise, motherfucker. That would be great.
Yeah, I just think that not that I want it to be like an action film or anything like that, but there was like no tension.
Yeah,
and it was sort of like, okay, well, he's in prison, and if he fails this court case, he's going to stay in prison. So it's like, okay.
Well,
so what's the difference? There's no difference.
He's not being tried for the death penalty, which would raise those stakes. That if you're found guilty, we will kill you. No, if you're found guilty, you don't get to go run off with the hooer that you met in singing class. And it's like, all right, she still found a way to fuck him in prison anyway, didn't she?
Yeah, but that was one of the other things that I didn't get. Is so she came into his cell while he was in solitary confinement. And she painted his face, and I heard he painted her face afterwards. But so she put the clown makeup on him, and then just, well, it's like, okay, but then what happened? Did she clean his face off? Did the guards go, what the fuck did you do to your feet? There were so many things in the film that were just like, well, hang on a minute, wait, explain this. Why is she the psychologist that's dressed like a patient in the singing class? Why did she seemingly just get away with starting this giant fire and almost causing a prison break? Like, what's going on?
Yeah,
did she?
Go ahead.
No, it's like, why there's so much stuff that kept happening, but there was no like logical or logistical explanation, whatever the right word to use was. That's why for me, I was really quickly into this. I was completely lost. I thought it would have been good if there was like a horror version of a cross between the one flew over the cuckoo's nest and like maybe the Raid, and that the prisoners revolted and escaped, and Arthur, who maybe didn't want to do it, ended up loving it, and that's how he would escape. And of course that would have led it to like Joker 3, Joker 4. But I just thought that they made a sequel, and I don't know who this audience was.
No, I don't know that there is an audience for this, but it's hard to really imagine what the approach is, because it seems like you're telling different stories, you're making different movies, and you're sort of, trying to weave them together. And to be like the greatest resident of Cape Coral, Florida, I'm going to read back something I tweeted after I saw the movie, that I was thinking that it was kind of like a mentally unstable comic book fan wrote a 3-episode arc of a classic series here in the United States called Cop Rock, which if you've never seen that, Hughezy, you have not lived. It was short-lived, but from the man who brought us Doogie Howser, he gave us a show called Cop Rock. It did have this amazing cinematography, and I think that the trailers made me think it was going to have, Sid Vicious and Nancy Spungen vibe, but it was really more like Kurt Cobain and Courtney Love, where you're like, she's trying to kill him, right? I mean, it's sort of like this, and I know how you feel about Nirvana, but it's just sort of like there's right, exactly. You've got, some people might like both Metallica and Nirvana, but you would probably not have much time for people like that. But in any case, I just thought that it failed on so many levels, this movie, and again, like, visuals don't necessarily make a good movie. It's like, if you go to, like at the museum, sometimes they'll have like an IMAX and it's going to be like overhead shots. At Disneyland, they have a ride called Soarin'. It's like, you're like sitting in a chair and you're pretending that you're flying all over the state of California. And it's like, oh my God, I smell like orange groves. And oh my God, there's Oakland. Dad, make sure you lock the doors. That sort of a vibe as you're flying around. Doesn't necessarily mean it's a good story. So what are your thoughts just sort of on like the attempt at storytelling that was this movie, Hughezy?
I just think basically they made the film on an idea. Like, even if you were to explain someone the story to like Megalopolis, or should I say Megaflopolis? But seriously,
I got a better one. I called my episode Mega Sloppiness.
Oh, nice.
Take that, Coppola.
Yeah, more like mega. What's the word again? Oh, mega lot of piss. Am I right? You take that, Coppola, you mess. By the way, I'd just like to officially state that Francis Ford Coppola is a vastly overrated filmmaker.
We talked about that on the show that I did, and sort of like what made me determined to actually see it in the theater is we were at dinner with friends, and we started talking. We opened up his IMDb, and he went through it. And look, I mean, the 70s, it is unbelievable. I mean, Godfather 2, Apocalypse Now. No, you don't have to make a good movie again after that. But then you keep making movies. And I like Peggy Sue Got Married. I think that's actually a really fun movie, But I mean, what you tell me, what's a movie that Nicolas Cage is in that isn't good, Hughezy? You can't find one.
Well, I wouldn't say that Ghost Rider 2 is good. I'd say Ghost Rider 2 is great.
Yes. All right. But we're back in agreement. Yeah.
Yeah. But even like The Outsiders.
Yeah.
Which I really, really thought of that as a good film for so many years and it never showed on TV. It was never on streaming. It hadn't come out on Blu-ray yet, so I could watch it in my 7 foot wide, 7 foot tall, 9 foot wide home cinema. But I finally just said, fuck it, I'm going to rent it off Amazon Prime. And I was like, oh, this film's crap.
I have not seen it in a very long time. Back, in the 80s, it would be on like HBO here in the US. So that's how I saw it. But it's probably maybe the demand's not there. Yeah, his overall track record, it's like, I mean, look, on some shows, they might celebrate Woody Allen's private life, but if you just look at his films, how many great movies did Woody Allen make? There's a few. And then he would make other movies like every year for a while there. Every single year, there'd be a new Woody Allen movie. And you sort of got the feeling that he was just making it for, his crowd at Elaine's, where they would have dinner and talk about like, oh, yeah, look, I put my friends in this movie. And no, it didn't make any money, but I kept working,
Yeah, but thankfully my producer, Jeffrey Epstein, keeps coming up with the budget for the next one.
Now, you want to talk about a guy who knew comedy. By the way, Cam Egan says Nick Cage was good in Moonstruck. Nick Cage is good in very many things, up to and including Kick-Ass and as Spider-Man Noir in the Spider-Verse films, and he'll be doing a TV series based on that. Back on topic, Raging Rhino says Joker 2 is the movie nobody needed done in a way nobody wanted. Don't know if they purposely did it to fail, but it's down there with Flash and Wonder Woman 84. Look, if we're talking about 3 movies, Joker 2, Wonder Woman 84, and Flash, I mean, Flash is like Star Wars: A New Hope compared to these other 2. And I know what I'm saying. I don't think anybody purposely makes a movie to fail. I don't see it. Your theory on Adam Sandler notwithstanding, Warner Brothers is not in a position where they're going to make a movie so that it's not successful. They're not going to try to like gotcha the incel crowd who love Joker 1. You know, I think that somewhere along the development process, someone was convinced this is going to be great, right? You have to feel like that, right, Hughezy? There's no way that they thought that this is going to be bad, is it?
Yeah, I'm exactly with you. Like, Venom is out here in about a week or 2, and then I think Kraven the Hunter is out before the end of the year.
I don't know where it comes out in Ireland, but here in the US, I think it's out December 14th. So very excited for Kraven the Hunter.
Because in my head, I'm like, there's no way they could do it wrong again. Like, there's no way Sony with Kraven would throw away another potential franchise. And it's really, so I went into this positively, even though I didn't like the first one. And I just thought, okay, I'm willing to be wrong. You know, I do like Joaquin Phoenix. He did a great film called You'll Never Know You Were Here or something like that. And it's about a guy who's hired to rescue abducted children. And it was really good, and he was brilliant in it. But I just think that I would actually say this could be a legitimate career damager, because like being in a bad film is one thing, but being in a bad film that loses a shitload of money and becomes like a pop culture punchline is not something you can recover from anytime soon. So hopefully he won't be relegated to the John Travolta straight to streaming action films that always have black and red posters. With stuff with words like arbitration.
The last few years, Bruce Willis was doing like 3 or 4 of those a year, like direct to streaming movies that you never heard of. And, I think he was trying to get as much cash to leave to his family, because I guess he knew it was coming. So yeah, I think that I think Joaquin Phoenix will be fine, because I think that this was what a lot of people expected it to be. And by the way, you were talking about a film that I have not seen Joaquin Phoenix in, but it made me think of another one. And then I realized there's 2 films that have very similar titles. The movie I was thinking of is I'm Still Here from 2010, which is the sort of the character that he played, where he was on with Letterman, and Letterman wasn't in on the joke, and he said, I wish you'd been here tonight or something. And then he does one, You Were Never Really Here. So this sounds like Joaquin Phoenix is a flip-flopper. Is he here or not, Hughezy? I don't know. Was he here or was he not here? I don't know if we have the answer.
He's the joke here. Seriously, we should go on tour.
Absolutely. Didn't Sam Bibley asked, didn't Joaquin Phoenix also just recently back out of a movie that had already begun production and basically sink the project? I think he might have issues with producers in the future. Yeah, I do think I heard that. And I don't want to mischaracterize the reason why I'm thinking that he did that. But I think it was a character that he decided he didn't want to play. But again, those Hollywood types, Hughes, you never really can count on them for anything, But
he was also one of the reasons why Doctor Strange get held up, because they wanted him to be Doctor Strange, and he agreed to do it, but then he wouldn't agree to do sequels, and then they were like, well, we kind of are a sequel company, and he's like,
Yeah, we're in the sequel business. And Yes, you will see in a moment that, well, you'll understand why I wanted to make sure I didn't mischaracterize. I had heard this story. Joaquin Phoenix was set to star in a queer romance movie alongside Danny Ramirez, but he dropped out of the project just days before filming was set to begin. Danny's former Top Gun Maverick co-star Louis Pullman said he'd replace Joaquin. I do like that. Like, oh, someone dropped out of a movie. A guy you've never heard of would be happy to take his role. Yeah, I'd heard that, Sam. But again, when the Bladtcast has to worry about being sued for libel, you know that everything's gone to hell in a handbag. As Hughezy would say, thanks, Kamala. But you know, it's the state of the world.
Yeah, she's a super villain. She needs to be called the Woker. Am I right? I roasted her.
Oh, she didn't even see that one coming, did she? So yeah, you went and saw this with friends?
I took my mom to see it.
Okay, yeah, that's the only friends you need, Hughezy.
Yeah. Well, that and the little baby Jesus. So it was our our weekly visit. I took her to see Joker, and she hated it so much that on the way home, she was in total silence, and there was definitely no mood for sex after. So I thought that, it's like, what about a waste of a Friday?
I know, yeah, exactly. You might as well have just took one of the neighbors. Talking about romance and sex, one of the things that I touched on with Laura was something that was so subtly featured in the film, was something that you messaged me, and you were like, wait, did they rape the Joker in prison? I'm like, well, they didn't show it, but it's very heavily implied. You clearly don't watch the kind of movies I watch usually, where that's usually where the romantic music starts, when a group of guys grab someone and drag them into the bathroom. But what were your thoughts when I was like, yeah, every indication is that's what happened, and it seems to be part of the narrative that he badmouthed them in court. So, they're going to goodmouth him in a few ways.
Yeah, I just thought that, Jesus, this really is an interview of two halves. Yeah, I never really got the vibe that he was assaulted in that way, but
yeah,
I don't know. I think that if that is the case, it kind of makes you wonder if it goes back to the whole thing where they got Arthur to kiss the guy for a cigarette.
Yeah.
So it makes you wonder, is that stuff they'd been doing to him throughout his stay in prison? But I gotta say to a point about Laura, where she says about how prisoners are abused and stuff. It's like, okay, I'm definitely against the SA of a person, but he's in prison because he murdered multiple innocent people. Like, I don't really care if his bed isn't comfortable, or if his Chardonnay wasn't exactly chilled that night during movie time. It's like in fucking Naked Gun 3 had a more realistic prison time than Joker 2.
I didn't expect Naked Gun 3 to come up, but obviously anytime you can talk about any film that features American hero Orenthal James Simpson, we should always recognize the great work that he did as
a husband, an actor. Sorry,
no, an actor, and someone who promoted car rental agencies. He was tremendous at both of those. So, yeah, it is one of those things. I'm like, again, like I said to Laura, thank you for not showing it to us, because there are definitely films where they're like, yeah, let's really show that what this character goes through. And even if they gave us the point of view of someone else, like just hearing it from down the hall. So I'm glad we didn't get any of it, but it is still surprising that it happens as part of the narrative on a major motion picture from a huge Hollywood studio, that it's like at some point this guy took a broom handle in the keister.
Yeah, and also the fact that the guards killed a guy during the middle of a court trial, the same night that they broom handled a guy, a prisoner, who, like, why wouldn't he? Why wouldn't he mention that the day after, like on court, and be like, "Oh yeah, by the way, where's Jeff? Anybody know where Jeff is?"
Nope. Nope. I think he's.
Yeah.
I think he has a tummy ache today. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, speaking of tummy aches, smell my broom. This fucking thing stinks as shit. Would you like to know why? I just thought that it became so surreal, and it's like we both enjoyed the film Trap to a point.
Oh, the first two acts I think were very well done. Yeah, there's a turning point in that movie though. Yeah,
and then it just becomes quite obvious that they didn't know how to end this.
Yeah,
so they're like, oh well, then he gets killed. It's like who was the person there to visit him? Who was that?
Oh, you mean that came to see Arthur, the guy at the end who tells him the joke? Is that what you're talking about?
No, because do you remember the guard said to him, Arthur, you get a visitor?
Oh, yeah.
Who was that came to see him?
I believe that there was no one to visit him. They wanted to get him in that hallway so that guy could stab him. Again, the prison dramas that I've seen before, that's kind of standard operating procedure is when you decide that you're going to let one of the inmates kill another inmate, you engineer the circumstances where it can happen where no one's watching. So that was my feeling anyway.
Yeah, and I just thought that the carving of the face was so corny.
Yeah.
Like on one hand, I get the idea. It's like, oh, he actually inspired the other Joker.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, but then if the other Jokers exist, who was Jack Nicholson?
Yeah, right, exactly. Well, now see, you're trying to pop open the multiverse, and I think one thing that we've learned is that no one wants the multiverse. You know, I think that we leave the multiverse bottled up.
I think, well, Nicolas Cage would love it so we could fight another spider.
That's true. It's true. That's absolutely. Ivan Soto says, from what I heard, the ending is kind of like Gotham, the show, but I bet the show did it better. Granted, I saw the show. I fell off on the Gotham TV show at a certain point. The idea of let's make a show about Batman without Batman in it. Eventually, it's like, waiting for Batman. I don't need to actually keep waiting for him. I do think that they were able to tell some good stories, but the problem with that show, and I don't know if you've seen it, Hughezy, is that after the first episode, they fell so in love with the actor who played the Penguin in it that they had the Penguin in like every episode. And I think he was initially intended to be part of like a rogues gallery, like the classic Batman with Adam West, where we have my friend Cesar Romero as the Joker.
Yeah, no, I watched the first season of Gotham. I couldn't believe how bad Jada Pinkett Smith was in it. Little did I know she wasn't actually acting. I got your back, Will.
Well,
not in that way.
Not allegedly. In that way. No. Yeah, you don't want anybody
no Diddy.
To think. Definitely no Diddy. Yeah. All right. Well, this is someone who knows your opinion from your shows that you've done over on Geekscape with me. So they asked the question. The great Kemi Egan wants to know, Hughezy, which was better, Avengers Endgame or Joker 2? That's a great question, Kemi Egan. I appreciate you asking it because I'm half in the bag already for the weekend, so I didn't think of it.
I would say Endgame is better simply for that opening scene and the time travel scene. Joker 2, I genuinely, well, cinematography wise, it looks great, and I probably pronounced that word incorrectly. The film looks amazing. Again, I seen it in IMAX. I've got,
yeah,
so it looked great because basically, if you like the final shot of the Joker, we standing up on the truck and the crowd celebrating him, and he does that with the makeup.
Yeah,
it's got this incredible look to it. They bring that into the sequel, but really, if I would say go see Joker 2 just to see it.
Yeah,
because they just go to the cinema, go see it. You might get to see a fun trailer for Kraven the Hunter. I don't know, but just go see it to get out of the house for the night. But when there won't be a Joker 3 regardless. But I think it needs to be seen on the big screen because it was actually filmed with IMAX. So
yes.
So that's your question, Endgame.
Yeah, so I can see any of the any films that I don't like. You can oftentimes take another bad film. When we were talking about Megalopolis, Plan 9 from Outer Space came up. That is a more watchable film than either of these. Raging Rhino says Todd Phillips Schumachered himself. Look, that first Schumacher Batman with the great Val Kilmer, who's now come up twice on this show.
I have to say that according to rumors, Schumacher probably also broom-handled himself.
Oh, well, that sounds like something that must be alleged somewhere.
Yeah.
It's only rumor. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that was fun, and then all of a sudden you get the George Clooney nipple Batman, or some people would say, Hughezy, that's the good Batman. It's the Clooney one. That's the only one that matters.
Did you ever hear the Joel Schumacher audio commentary for Batman and Robin?
No, but it sounds like I should.
Yeah, you need to get it. He actually he's complaining the whole time, and then he leaves about 25 minutes before it's done. And you can hear him like playing on his phone or text on his phone. He's like, "Yeah, I gotta go. This is."
Someone recently posted a clip. I guess Ben Affleck did a commentary on Armageddon, and all he does is just shit on the story and talk about how terrible it was to work with Michael Bay. And I'm like, this is some of Affleck's finest work in the 20th century. This commentary, the little bit that I heard like 2 minutes of it. It was great.
Well, speaking of Mr. Bay, the artiste, I would like to use this time to officially invite you on for Michael Bay's Explosive Christmas, a director roundtable that will be recorded next month, potentially, where we discuss the glorious work of one of cinema's greats. And you have to wear a Christmas sweater and get drunk during it.
Well, I think that sounds fair. Yeah, you have been kind enough to invite me on a number of these roundtables where we talk about whether or not certain directors stink. Zack Snyder being basically the layup. That was the obvious one. We had a little bit of a split decision on Quentin Tarantino. I believe that the men thought that Quentin Tarantino was good, and the ladies did not. So then our votes canceled theirs out, though, and he's great. Yeah,
but and I hope this doesn't come across as sexist, but at least those women had two big tits with those wrong opinions.
Well, a total of 4. Let's be honest. 4.
That is true, but my mic was in the way, so I just assumed,
They just had one. It was an interesting thing that Ivan Soto said. I didn't see Transformers 1, but I did see The Wild Robot with my kids. And again, it's an animated movie based on a book that's for kids, but it's incredibly well done. The visuals are great. It doesn't seem like necessarily one for Hughezy to take his mom to, but it is far more watchable than Joker 2 or Megalopolis.
Well, I can tell you, Ivan, the plan is potentially on Saturday, which is tomorrow day. Me and my friend Figgy are going to go see Transformers 1 in the 4DX, and I'm going to get hammered before it. So there you go.
So that should be the thing. Yeah, there'd been talk. My son's 9, and some of his friends there had been talk about going to see Transformers 1. And then as it got closer, the talk just evaporated and there was like no excitement for it. So somehow they lost what should be their biggest demographic, kids who just want an excuse to eat popcorn,
Yeah. But these kids' films, they start marketing them too far in advance.
Yeah,
because like if the trailer came out last month and you said, "Hey boy, want to see this boy?" and they go, "Yes, father," and go, it's like, but if it's like a year in advance, it's like you got to remember that kids are dumb and have no loyalty. Those pieces of shit.
Yeah, it sounds like you've been using my Amazon Alexa to listen in on conversations I have with my son, because that's basically what it sounds like. In any, I was trying to find something that I figure because we referenced it, it might be fun to just spend a moment with Ben Affleck's commentary on Armageddon, which is not on like an official page. It's not on the movie studio, so I feel like honestly, there's worse things than videos getting taken down. But this is specifically the sequence that I saw that I heard about. So since we brought it up, and basically I brought it up, let's listen to Ben Affleck talking about working with Michael Bay on Armageddon.
I asked Michael why it was easier to train oil drillers to become astronauts than it was to train astronauts to become oil drillers, and he told me to shut the fuck up. So that was the end of that talk. He's like, Ben, just shut up, okay? This is a real plan, all right? I was like, you mean it's a real plan at NASA to train oil drillers? He was like, just shut your mouth. See, here's where we demonstrate that, because Bruce is going to tell the guys that they did a bad job of building the drill tank.
Anyway, that was kind of the exact part that I wanted. Just the idea that, look, and perhaps Mr. Affleck had enjoyed himself a little bit before he sat down to record that. I like that loose lips didn't sink any ships there. But that's what people are missing if they don't get physical media, right, Hughezy?
Exactly, and if anyone knows about filmmaking logic, it's the director of Live by Night.
Wait, is that Night Knight? Is it Live by Night Melendez, or am I thinking of something different?
No, that would be Not Allowed to Live by Night Melendez.
I don't know if I should have dinged the bell after that. So, as people, as you think back on Joker 2, what are going to be your prevailing thoughts? Like when you first think of this movie in the future, what is it going to be, Hughezy?
I genuinely think that this is a potentially the final nail in the coffin of DC as a brand. I think it's just so tarnished. I'm convinced that the reaction to this film, as silly as this may sound, will cause Superman to flop.
It's interesting because there's a lot of excitement and focus on the fact that James Gunn, and they've already filmed it. Obviously, there's a lengthy post-production before it comes out next summer. But so that film is done. And yes, if I'm Warner Brothers, I'd be like, wait, what's our track record on these movies? Let's take Christopher Nolan movies out of it. How much success have we had? And I think in terms of budget and box office, the Wonder Woman movie is one of those that stands out in terms of, look, you have to admit it was successful, whereas most of the other ones were not. And Ken Megan wants to know if we've seen the Superman documentary. If you're talking about the one that Tim Burton was going to make with who we spoke of earlier, the great Nicolas Cage, that documentary is fascinating. Now, if you're talking about a different documentary, I don't know what it is. Have you ever seen that, Hughezy?
The Death of Superman Lives. I literally have it on my desktop because when I was ordering it, you're going to be shocked by this detail. I was really drunk at the time.
Oh,
can you believe it?
That doesn't sound like you, no.
And instead of ordering the Blu-ray, I ordered the digital download, which I'm furious about. So I have it here on my desktop. It's an amazing documentary. So, to answer that question, yes. And I've also seen the making of Superman Returns, which contains footage of what's his name again?
Kevin Spacey?
Yeah, Kevin Spacey being a real you-know-what to an actor on set.
Oh, well, that doesn't track with the narrative on him, the brand. Oh, and by the way, Kemi, again, I know the one you're talking about. There's a new one out about Christopher Reeve. I have not seen that. I would like to see it. I've heard great things about it. Ivan Soto. It's called Super/Man with it's about Christopher Reeve.
You should review that with Quadfather.
I don't know that Quadfather gets out to the movies very much, but
tell him it's not diverse and be like, I'll see it in a second, brother.
100%.
Yeah, 100%.
You've been on with Quad somewhat regularly. I've just never been on at the same time as you, right? I've seen you pop on there. Usually it's to insult American funny man Ray DeVito, right?
Yeah. If anybody listening doesn't know who Quadfather is, He looks exactly like Ming the Merciless, but sounds exactly like Sam Elliott.
Yes, right, exactly. I think that's a perfect way to describe him. And listeners of this show will have heard a snippet where the first time my pal Liam McEnany mentioned that he knew me, Quadfather was impressed because he enjoyed my work on the radio and had listened to the Bladtcast at one point. And so literally there's no opinion he can have that will cancel out my admiration for someone who appreciates my work. You know how that goes, Hughezy.
I don't acknowledge that term, Liam McElhenney, because we were supposed to do another stakeout podcast that would have been huge. We had venues booked for the live tour. There was merchandise planned, and he dropped out. So Liam McElhenney, you're the real Ray DeVito in my eyes. What do you think about that for a roast?
There was a chance that he was going to swing by today, but he was part of our Megalopolis conversation. And yeah, boy, another stakeout is not a film I'd thought about in a while. That's one of those ones where the first movie's fun, whatever. And then it's like, let's do another one. Oh, no, wait, let's not.
I just love the will they, won't they romantic triangle between Madeline Stowe, Richard Dreyfuss, and equally as beautiful as Madeline Stowe, Rosie O'Donnell. Which one will he go for? I don't know. Get to watch another stakeout to find out.
Yeah, that's the only way that anyone would be able to find out. So the final question on Joker. If somebody says, oh, you saw Joker, should I see it? What's your answer?
Yes. Go to the cinema, see it for yourself. Don't let a bunch of straight white men tell you what to think. Yeah, you dumb bitch.
Well, yeah, I guess that part's in there. But obviously, all films will be overshadowed by the fact that we're getting both Venom 3 and Craven before the end of the year. Yeah.
Don't forget Red 1 by The Rock, the Christmas action comedy. That looks like it's going to be completely different from anything he's made before.
Yeah, no, it doesn't at all look like anything that The Rock has made before. Did you see, speaking of Christmas newer films, did you see the film with David Harbour a couple Christmases ago, Violent Night, where he's Santa Claus?
Loved it.
I thought that was fun. And this looks like somebody saw that and was like, oh, but what if we made it not fun? That's what Red sounds like to me. What would be the scenario where you would go and see the film version of Wicked, which is coming out late next month?
Pretty low. It seems to take itself too seriously. Like that's why I love Jim Florentine's favorite Rock of Ages, because it's so fucking stupid, and Tom Cruise is in it.
Well, yeah, right, exactly. And the thing to keep in mind with Wicked is that it's an adaptation of a Broadway musical, and I believe I heard the running time for the film is 2 hours and 40 minutes, and that is part one. So they've taken a musical and they've broken it into two movies, and we'll probably get 4.5 to 5 hours of, because that's really what I think everyone thought when they first saw The Wizard of Oz as children, was like, yeah, but what's the story between these witches? Like, why don't they like each other?
But I like to give everything a go. Like I tried even to watch Frozen, but it's just not for me. Like I can't do the musical stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you can see something like Frozen and you go like, oh, yeah, there's a reason why this theater is filled with children. This is not necessarily one that was going to translate particularly well. In terms of things clearly made for another audience, I saw you comment on one of the videos for the show that I do on Geekscape where we were talking about Agatha all along. I don't know if you're watching that show, but that show is very much like we're all saying, us on the panel is like, oh, I mean, except for the most recent episode, it's mostly well made, but it is clearly for a different audience. Are you trying to slog through that show, Hughezy?
No, I'm actually really enjoying Agatha all along so far. It's just that, but I think it's because I don't know the comic or the characters in the comic, so it's not like so I'm learning as I'm going on. I don't really have a clue what's going on, but I'm enjoying it so far.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's yeah. I mean, she's really like mostly a side character in the Fantastic Four, and it feels like they're going for a different audience, but that's not what Joker 2 was. Joker 2 was a big swing, and they wanted everybody to come out and see it. Like you said, they shot it with IMAX cameras. You don't shoot a movie with IMAX cameras if you think it's not going to be successful,
Exactly.
So.
And when you're using an IMAX camera to film a courtroom scene, then you're making a mistake.
It's a great point. It's like, yeah, but they want to be able to see the judge's bench in the wide shot. Hughezy. They want to make sure that they don't just see the jury. So Hughezy, I appreciate you jumping in here for the second part of this conversation, and for sitting there legally downloading music, obviously, while you were, Ivan Soto. I mean, they went full IMAX. Geez, yeah. I mean, if you're going to do IMAX, don't just, speaking of Superman Returns, there were sequences in Superman Returns that were in IMAX, and it was like you put on your 3D glasses for those segments in the theater. And yeah, if you're going to do it, you should actually take the big swing and do it all the way. Raging Rhino says Joker 2 is like watching Michael Jordan playing baseball. It's a great observation, Raging Rhino. I'm glad you've had a very long lunch today, Raging Rhino, and you've been able to be here with us. What I did want to do is I wanted to let people know where they can find more Hughezy content. Specifically, I've enjoyed much Hughezy content, but when you had on famous American shock jock Aaron Imholt on your show to talk about boxing, along with a special guest, Dean, the Aussie guy from the United States of Australia, that is what I would say is must-watch content. I was going to say TV, but it's not really television. So,
yeah, if you ever wanted to know what a podcast version of the Joker going on the Murray Abraham talk show was like, or whatever he was called, Joker 1, then go look for episode 195, I think it was, of my podcast, which started off as a friendly, manly talk about boxing, turned into a 30 to 40 minute long argument with all of those words being used in it. It was the greatest thing I've ever done.
And at no time does Aaron Imholt get mad at you for engineering it. He's only mad at the Aussie guy. That's that. They say the greatest trick that the devil ever pulled is convincing us he didn't exist. You were the devil in that episode.
Well, speaking of sequels that don't live up to expectations, Aaron is potentially returning in December.
Wow. I will definitely tune in for that, and put that behind the paywall if you don't want anybody to see it, but make some money. But so we referenced some of the director roundtables that you've been kind enough to invite me to. So let people know where they can find all of that.
Yes, they go to Hughes Entertainment on YouTube. There is a membership tier, but it's only cheap. But there is a lot of video content on there. If you see it, does this director suck with the director's name? You will, of course, find a lot of Christian content. And jump in the chat and let us know if Judd Apatow sucks, if Jerry Seinfeld sucks, if James Cameron sucks, Quentin Tarantino, Zack Snyder. And also, if you know Christian's co-workers, such as Kaylee, she will be in those episodes. Carl from WATP is in a load of video episodes that I have. And if I could just do a quick plug to, not in that way, for Kelly, she just did an episode where she reviewed Saw.
Yes, the first Saw film. Yes, I saw that she had posted that.
And because of her, I'd seen Saw 1 to 7, and I thought, oh yeah, I forgot I'd watched all them. Little did I know there's since been 3 more. So yes. That's going to be tonight's plan. I'm going to watch Saw 8, 9, and 10. And little did I know, 9 stars Chris Rock.
Yes, and yet they still made another one after that. Yeah, I have never seen any of the Saw films. I'm familiar with the concept, and I think it's well done. If I were to see it, I would watch the first one. I'm not going to jump in on Saw 10 though.
Yeah. Well, I would. Starting with 10 is probably not a good idea, because it's a continuous story.
Oh, I didn't even realize that it continued. I see that. And Raging Rana wants us to know he's not working today, getting ready for a vacation. Excellent. He and his wife are celebrating their 25th anniversary next week. Well, happy anniversary. And John, knowing you as long as I have, I'm assuming that you're still married because you didn't bring your wife to Joker 2, but tell me if I'm wrong. That was definitely one that I'm like, I'm going to go ahead and duck out and see that myself after the kids went to bed. Well, Hughezy, thank you so much for spending so much time first in the waiting room and then here on the show talking about Joker 2. And I don't know that it's a good movie, but it's a very important movie. And as we talked about when we talked about Megalopolis, this is just a shockingly huge year for bad cinema with Madam Web, Unfrosted, Borderlands, which I did see on the big screen. I believe I saw it on an IMAX screen. And now in the same week, Megalopolis and Joker 2. What's
Roadhouse.
November got in store for? I didn't see the new Roadhouse, but I've heard that it might not be as good as the first one, right, Hughezy?
Yeah, Muhammad Ali's last fight was more entertaining than Roadhouse. And that's a harsh joke that I won't go into.
No, nor should you. Again, thanks to Hughezy and thanks to Laura Grafton, who is well on her way to Grandma's house for Canadian Thanksgiving. Thanks to everyone in the chat. It's always fun to know that we're not just speaking into these cameras and then it sits there into nothingness like a Chad Zumach show. So you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Christian DMZ, and please subscribe to the Bladtcast, Bladtcast, and we have plenty more stuff coming up. I'm gonna have some guests on to talk about Jason Reitman made a film about the first night of the first episode of Saturday Night Live, and it's called Saturday Night. And in that film, Hughezy, the same actor plays Andy Kaufman and Jim Henson of the Muppets. So that might be everything you need to know about it. But I feel like Saturday Night Live is one of those things that exists by reputation outside of the U.S., but it's not something that people really care about other than, maybe you see videos of Adam Sandler and Chris Farley from like 30 years ago posted on YouTube.
Oh, no, I'm a pretty big Saturday Night Live fan. I still watch the current stuff because there's usually at least one funny thing per week.
Yeah, but when you see it, you feel like you're rewarded. It's like, well, thank you for at least those 6 to 8 minutes being good. So, Jason Reitman's from Saturday Night. I believe that will be our next episode. So subscribe to the Bladtcast, Bladtcast, where you find podcasts, and of course our YouTube channel, so that you can see Hughezy and my lovely faces as we talk about Joker 2. Thanks again to the chat. Thanks again to everyone who says things like great show and cheers. We'll see you next time on the Bladtcast.